This week on Let's Talk Oculus episode 104, we are joined by David Khan. He is the creator of Galactic Catch, which is a story-based fishing game on the Quest 2. Now, that is also developed by BaoBab Studios. And BaoBab, you'd probably know them for their VR interactive titles such as Invasion, Bonfire. We have Paper Planes 1 and 2, just to name a few. They've been Emmy Award winning 9 times as far as I remember. So we go into a lot. So we go into a bit of Galactic Catch, but we also just talk about storytelling as a medium, like how can storytelling be conveyed in mixed reality, for example, because obviously we have the Quest 3 only a week away now from being announced, and mixed reality is going to be a big component of that. So we get into that, as well as other different storytelling aspects such as TV shows and just VR in general. So a really exciting podcast to go into 1 week before the Connect. We will be live for that Connect, by the way. We'll be live at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, or that's 12:30 p.m. Eastern time as well. Things will be announced on my Twitter as well as the Discord. Definitely check us out on there. All right, let's talk Oculus. Let's Talk Oculus, a VR podcast, is proudly sponsored by the good folks at Patreon. If you want to support the show, join us on patreon.com/Let's Talk Oculus. Alright, welcome back to Let's Talk Oculus. We are joined by a guest, as you can see from the video podcast. We are joined by David, who is the creator of Galactic Catch and head of product at BaoBab Studios. You probably know BaoBab from their actual short films in VR rather than their games, but we'll get into that in a moment. David, how you doing?
Great, thank you guys for having me on, especially this Labor Day.
Yes, we are recording on Labor Day. Both me and Samson have been playing Galactic Catch. Samson, I believe you finished it now.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, that was a game I got, and I needed to finish as soon as I could. So I think the first week I played a few hours or an hour or two each day or each night or every other night, and until I got the to be continued.
Yes.
Spoilers. Yeah. So obviously BaoBab came from, like I said, VR interactive films. We have Invasion with the little rabbit, as I remember. We have Paper Birds, both 1 and 2, just to name a couple there. And there's quite a nice array. Emmy Award winning, I think 9 times as well.
Correct.
Creators,
yes,
and
times.
such. So my first opening question to you, David, is that why games? Why games?
So a little bit of tangent, but if you guys would humor me. So the studio was created about 2016, so doing the math, 7-8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was founded by a combination of veterans in the animation space. So the creator, director of films like all the Madagascar series, Eric Darnell, and Larry Culler, who created some of the original technology to do characters on films like Toy Story, Toy Story 2, and so on. And then Maureen Fan, who's the CEO of BaoBab Studios, and her background is actually in the gaming space, like mine. So she led the Farmville franchise at Zynga, as well as myself, who worked on games like Mafia Wars back in the day. And so BaoBab Studios has always kind of been this kind of crossbreed between traditional animation and gaming space. And so we tried to do that in every project of ours, from the very earliest ones of Invasion, Asteroids, where we're kind of adding interactivity and immersion to the story, to then things like Bonfire and Paper Birds, and later on, where it was much more interactive, where you kind of chose the path you want to take. Based on how you interacted with the characters in the scene, they might respond differently to you, and the choices you have would be different of how you proceed forward. And then leading to Galactic Catch is one of the things we heard from people who have loved Invasion, who have loved our past films, is they wish they were longer. They wish they could do more in the films. Invasion's like 6 minutes, Bonfire, one or longer ones, and Bobby Ga are still like, half an hour or so. And so we always want to both go back to the world of invasion asteroids. So Galactic Catch is based in that same world. So some of the same characters you introduced in Invasion Asteroids are the same kind of protagonists in Galactic Catch. But we also want to make just longer. Like we wanted to have a 5-hour plus campaign. We want people to explore this whole larger universe that we introduced in Invasion, but we really don't talk much about. We only just introduced the first 2 characters in the series, Mac and Cheese, the 2 alien characters. And they are essentially the protagonists in both Invasion, Asteroids, but also Galactic Catch. So it was kind of a combination of we want to kind of flex a little bit of our more gaming muscles, but also we thought this would be a great way to kind of expand the universe of Invasion for those who are looking for more into it. And ironically, maybe not ironically, but we actually designed Invasion as a series of shorts. So kind of like the classic old school Looney Tunes, where like Tom and Jerry and others like get into like mischief like every episode and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The idea with Invasion was that it was always going to be a series of shorts where like Mac and Cheese would go to invade Earth and they would be thwarted by something kind of humor filled. Like in the case of Invasion, it was a bunny with her name's Chloe, but it could have been other things like a bird or insects and so on. But just the idea that that they're always trying to conquer the Earth, but they always get thwarted by something kind of humorous in nature. And so that's kind of
like episodes of Looney Tunes type of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the genesis of Galactic Catch, of like starting from the idea of how do we expand this universe of Invasion, but do it in a more interactive, maybe more fun way, more lighthearted way than just try and tell another short story.
Who would you say Galactic Catch is for? Who's it targeted towards?
So first and foremost, I always have wanted to make a fishing game. So first and foremost, it was targeted towards players who love fishing games. Like Nintendo Wii Fishing. If you play, fishing and, non-fishing games like Fortnite, Stardew Valley, Zelda, you name it. Like
the fishing aspects of games.
The fishing aspects, Animal Crossing, it's kind of targeting those who are looking for something easy to get into but hard to master, is the main thing. And then secondly, we're looking to tell a great story. So we're looking to tell a fun, family-friendly story for those who have been following us for a while. And want to know what happens to the characters while they're not trying to conquer the Earth and while they're not trying to invade a planet, what they do on their spare time. And then lastly, we've always been thrilled with this idea of, in lots of our pieces, we go down the path of science fiction. For myself, I grew up and still am a huge fan of Star Trek. So, what we thought fishing would marry really well with was the idea of this intergalactic nature. So not just fishing on Earth, not just fishing kind of exotic locations, but really fishing on all the different planets and, in this fictional universe that we can make up anything that we want. And so that kind of combination of, VR, fishing, intergalactic, galactic locations, we thought would be kind of fun way to, tell the story of a new story in the Invasion universe.
Hey, we know public lobbies in VR games can be a bit toxic, feel a bit empty at times. That's why we created the Let's Talk Oculus Discord, a friendly community that you can join for multiplayer meetups, general VR chat, the game, and chat about VR, fitness motivation, and there's even a very impressive 3D printing channel. Join over 100 of our community members in the Let's Talk Oculus Discord for free. The link is right in the description.
Okay, what I really like about Galactic Catch is the kind of feel around the world. So what I mean by that is that with something like Angry Birds, you've got such a simple concept of a game, and then you have characters, and then those characters, there's a little underlying story behind the game, and now you can see it's turned into like a franchise and a movie and all that stuff, right? But it's such a simple kind of concept, and it's kind of the same thing with here, where it's a fishing game, right? Just down bare bones, it's a fishing game. But once when I first heard about Galactic Catch, I'll be honest, I wasn't really interested because I was like, it's a fishing game, you know? I don't know that I already have VR fishing. Why would I get that? But then I played it and I was like, oh, they're taking this into different
I was the
levels. Samson was the opposite, where you've got characters, you've got like mac and cheese, for example. You have different types of fish, but all the fish are kind of like their own kind of characters in a way, and add to the story, and then you've got new worlds that you build upon, which is kind of like the BaoBab Studios way of flipping what a simple game or concept would be into their own kind of style, which is what I really like.
Yeah, and one of the things we wanted to do was so many people didn't get a chance to try out our second project called Asteroids, which is a sequel to Invasion, and you played the role of we called it a menial task robot, and your role in the story was you were saving mac and cheese from an asteroid that crashed into your ship, and this was like a fully immersive, interactive experience where you could walk around your spaceship and interact with things, and depending the choices you make, like mac and cheese would interact differently with you. However, like it was made for like the Vive and the DK2 and so on at the time. And so it's like really only something you saw in like film festivals and exhibitions and so on. And so part of the genesis of Galactic Catch was continuing some of the same characters we introduced with Invasion and also Asteroids, where you also play the same character, a menial task robot. And once again, you have to save mac and cheese from this unexpected adventure that happens. And so, for those who are fans of the past projects, you know, there's kind of those references that go back to it. But also, if you're brand new to the space, you know, and you just want to play a fun game, you know, and you also happen to like fishing, you don't need to know the backstory about Invasion, or anything like that. You just need to know, like, you have to save your friends from this gigantic alien creature that swallows them whole.
Yeah, and it's funny because I haven't played Asteroids, but I haven't played Invasion for a very, very long time. It's just a short little. I remember, when I first got my Quest 2 is when I first played Invasion. Because I think it's free, I believe.
Yeah, it's
right?
free. Yeah, it's free on Quest 2. Yeah.
I think that's probably why I just jumped in as well. It's a free app. Let's jump in. It's like this little cute animation thing, and it's fun and such. But now I kind of want to go back to that now, knowing Galactic Catch, that there is some story. But at the same time, it is such a standalone game too. Like you can still really enjoy it without having that backstory, which is nice.
Is there a way to experience Asteroids as well?
Unfortunately, the only way right now is you can watch kind of a YouTube version of it, so not really the full same experience. It gives you the story, but not that interactivity. So unfortunately, you know, it is one of those things that it was great at the time, but lost the time due to like all the technology changes in the VR space over the past few years. But if you guys ever do come by our studio, we still have, you know, the whole Vive room scale setup done. So we're happy to entertain you guys, you know, and anyone to try it out.
Well, is there any chance it could be redone?
Maybe. One of the things that we're looking into now is, you know, with things like the Quest Pro, Quest 3, and so on, that the technology is kind of starting to catch up from like performance wise to get to the same point where like the DK2 was like back in the day, making much more performant. Like one of the things we had a challenge with Galactic Catch was in order to like render out all the water, the landscapes, the environments, and also to be able to do fishing game, we pretty much pushed the Quest 2 to its limits. And so we had to make kind of very careful choices of what to do and what not to do and what to show in order to be able to run at least, you know, 72 frames per second in the experience and be smooth. And so that's one of the things we're interested in, like with Quest 3 and so on, that potentially we could, you know, bump that up maybe to 90 or even above, if the performance looks as good as they said.
Does it runs at 72? I didn't even notice. Those aren't things I noticed still.
Yeah. It runs at 72 frames. I think for anyone who plays any type of fishing game or any kind of arcade type thing, like, that loss of one frame or two, like, is painful, right? Just like that's the difference
between
between
be consistent.
Yeah, that's the difference between having a fish or not having a fish, right? Especially if you spend minutes or longer trying to catch something. So, for us, it was all about like making sure it ran smooth, ran fine, and wouldn't do anything that could affect kind of that core gameplay of catching fish.
It is a really fantastic graphical style. Very, bright colors. It's very beautiful. You enjoy being in these places, or I enjoy being in these places. And but beyond that, the sound design is
thank you.
is fantastic.
We had the same Emmy-winning composer that has done our past projects. Everything from Invasion going forward. His name's Rex Darnell. He created original musical score for Galactic Catch, which will hopefully sometime in September we'll hopefully make available to everyone so they can listen on Spotify, etc. To do it. Yeah. And then we also had really great sound design from also some of the same teams that worked with us on our past projects. So sound, I think, is like for us, sound is a huge part of keeping the immersion factor, even to the point where for those it's subtle, but for those who are pay enough close attention, the sound design actually changes depending on the fish you're catching. The harder the fish, the more up tempo the beat is, and so on, and the easier the fish. It's less dramatic, less of a crescendo going on, to kind of give you a hint that like how difficult the catch is going to be without being as much in your face about it.
Right, it's another small cue.
Yeah.
It's the level. I wrote down amazing sound design on my notes as well. It was just it's the, you can tell it's not an afterthought or anything like that. It's built with the game, right? And I think there can be, I understand it with, especially with like indie developers, for example, sound design might be an afterthought because it's hard to be amazing at every single little aspect, and that's a whole industry in itself. But you can tell with this game is that it's kind of built with sound involved at the get-go. And you already have those things in place. It's not, okay, we've got the game, we're going to add a soundtrack onto this. And it shows. It shows. It's those little minuscule things that it's like, oh, that's nice. That sounds good. Or that, even just the effects of the water or such, it's beautiful. It really adds, you're right, it's the immersion. I think it's why PlayStation VR is trying to push sound design a lot. They say 3D audio, wear your headphones, because it adds to the immersion in a lot of aspects that a lot of people neglect or don't really think too much of.
We in both in Galactic Catch and especially in our past experiences, sound was a huge factor, especially as our directors who created our past projects, like Eric Darnell and so on. It was one of the easier ways that we could get an audience or a user to look a certain direction or pay attention to a certain thing when we couldn't guarantee that they would follow directions or make the choice when we want them to make the choice. Kind of sound design combined with lighting and so on was kind of a way to get them to look over in this direction, or turn around when we want them to turn around, and that's kind of been, part of the DNA of the company of using, sound as kind of as cues to what to do next. And that was also one of the reasons we were, want to have, full narrated voiceover and voice recording in Galactic Catch for all the characters, both in English and in Chinese, was also to add kind of immersion feel to make the characters actually feel like characters, to the point of, for anyone who, another interesting Easter egg is that the narrator that you listen to at the beginning of Galactic Catch and at the end, that's actually the voice of Eric Darnell, the creator of Invasion, and Asteroids, and a bunch of other of our projects.
Very cool.
That's fun. The other thing I also wanted to say on top of sound design, and this is what I wrote down in my notes. This is the first thing I thought when, as soon as I get into the tutorial, I was like, it feels like a Disney version of real VR fishing.
Yes.
And I mean that in a very complimented way. The worlds, I've not finished the game, but I had a quick sneak on YouTube just to see what the other worlds look like. and the level of detail in the worlds in terms of the art style, for first and foremost, felt more. That's what I mean. Like Disney, like it feels like more animation characters. You know, it kind of suits what your other projects are and such. Like, was it ever gonna be? Were you always going to do this art style, or was there ever a choice in going a different direction?
We experimented early on with actually something that I would say was even more cartoony in nature, something that was less realistic, less believable, and about a quarter through the project, one of the people who came on the project was actually, you mentioned Disney, Scott Meese, who acted as our art director on the project. His background's actually ex-ILM, LucasArts, Disney, and so on. So he's worked on, Star Wars, and as well as like Imagineering projects at Disney. So his background is that, and so we pivoted a little bit from going a little bit less cartoony route to more kind of believable but realistic with everything. Kind of match the aesthetic we have with Asteroids and Invasion a little bit more, and that's what you see before you. So it was we started with the idea of, hey, like, how can we concept art kind of believable but fantastic destinations that one of the inspirations we have for this was kind of 1950s science fiction. So I don't know if you ever see kind of the old school NASA posters of of the planets, or there was a book in the 1980s called Across the Universe that was National Geographic, and it was like science fiction artists kind of create what they thought the planets of the solar system would look like. Fantastical things that of what life could be like on those planets, and that was kind of our inspiration. It was kind of like retro 1950s, 1960s science fiction for a kind of look at these planets of of what could be believable but still fantastical in nature, and then apply kind of this semi-realistic art style to it, but keeping the creatures fantastical and keeping the environment. Something that you could not experience on Earth.
I got to say, this conversation really, really, really makes me want a Walkabout BaoBab collab.
We would love to. I mean, there. You mentioned Real VR and Walkabout. They were definitely our inspirations for this. They I think set the bar in terms of like look and feel and exploration environments, and we were just hoping to match and exceed them in our own way, but we definitely look up to those guys as for inspiration for these things.
Speaking of, is multiplayer on the roadmap?
That is the biggest thing we're trying to figure out right now. It's definitely the number one ask from players in the community is multiplayer. We're trying to figure out a way that we can do it with our own twist to it, because multiplayer has been done before in similar games, Real VR and so on. And so while we, fishing by its nature is a social endeavor, and so that's what, for sure we want to add that social element to it, but also our gameplay and just the fact that we are in this fantastical, little bit make-believe universe. We want to try something different that is not kind of, a copy of what's seen before. So that's our number one thing that we're figuring out now and designing around. But also we're trying to, one of the other few things that people ask for, besides more content and, and more, fish and other things to explore, is also, figure out ways we can add a little more challenge to the game, make it, one of the features that didn't get in for launch, but we're hoping, to, plan in the future, is our idea of predators in the space. So, adding a little bit more of a challenge and obstacle to players, a little bit more of more arcade elements to the fishing gameplay, but really kind of adding that sense of challenge for players that, consider themselves like the masters of the game so far, and want that extra challenge, to reel in the next fish. But multiplayer is definitely the number one big thing I think, the community's asked for that we want to support.
I guess it is also, as a studio, multiplayer is the one thing y'all haven't really endeavored into. We so this was our first game as a studio.
And, just like everything we've done to date has been an experiment on its own right. Both this was the first game. It was also the first time we did fully remote development on a project because we developed this over COVID time period. And so it was a huge learning experience for us of how do we do this, remotely. And not just everyone kind of is in California remotely, but, we had a team here in California. We had a team in Taiwan working on this as well. We have folks in Europe and everywhere. So it was across the board.
That's crazy.
Every different time zone you can think of. Plus, we are as a studio. Most of our experiences are half an hour or more around that time frame. So it was an interesting challenge of how do we kind of create a compelling story around gameplay, but give it make it a few hours long versus just a half an hour long to do it. So it was definitely not a first for us, and multiplayer for sure. It would definitely be a first for us to figure out, especially how do we add a little bit of character story to the kind of multiplayer aspect, but really not prevent people from enjoying it.
Yeah, I was trying to think on how to do a fishing co-op campaign type of deal, and how it's I'm glad I'm not responsible for it. Yeah.
When you've learned so much. So is with BaoBab now with this game with the Galactic Catch, is right now is it still to be okay, we're still gonna do interactive VR as like our main draw and then maybe games will start to trickle in, or is this kind of the path that you're long term kind of see yourself in, or as a studio?
It's interesting
to make more story based driven games.
It's interesting to say that. I would say we are expanding beyond just doing virtual reality. So over the past year or two, besides working on Galactic Catch and releasing that, and we're still planning to do things in the virtual reality space, whether it be a game or maybe something more story driven. We've also been working on things that are outside of VR space. So one of the things we're still in beta right now on is a Roblox game for another project of ours called Momoguro. And the best way to describe Momoguro is if you think of Transformers meets Pokemon, kind of this organic Transformer type thing happening. That's kind of the premise of the series, as well as going to maybe a little bit non-interactive media. So we announced two book series that are being published by Penguin Random House and so on, including a graphic novel for a project called Intercats that's hopefully coming out next year or two. And then we are, developing television shows as well for the streamers and other platforms. So for us, it really actually comes down to what is the best way to tell that story. And in some cases, it might be virtual reality or maybe augmented reality, especially with the whole mixed reality stuff coming out, in the near future with Apple and so on. But also it might be something more traditional of a graphic novel and so on. So it honestly, each project of ours is different, and that's what makes it kind of both interesting but also really challenging.
How big is the team?
So for Galactic Catch, it varied everywhere between 5 to 10 people that are working on the project at depending time. For our past projects, it's kind of been from 10 to 30 people, depending on the size and scale of the project. And honestly, for even some projects that we're in development on that are still early, it's 1 to 3 people that are being developed on it. Wow. So actually, no matter what, we're still definitely a small startup studio. Yeah. I don't think we've been anything beyond like 20 or so people in our past studio. So we even the past 5-6 years, 7 years we've been around, we've always kind of try to keep it small. Especially now when most places are going kind of either remote or kind of hybrid remote like us. We're able to do in some ways a lot more with a lot less people because there's just a lot more it's weird. It's kind of everyone we look for people that are independent and able to kind of take on a lot on their own. but we also reuse a lot of technology and reuse a lot of services for each of our projects. So, for Galactic Catch, for example, mainly the same people who worked on our past projects, like I was mentioning, like Rex Darnell and so on, that kind of DNA of us learning how to do sound design, has been something we built out over the past 7 years or so. So for us to do, good sound design is not as hard for us maybe compared to like, a newer studio that's this is their first time doing it.
Well, it's clear because I love the aspect of how VR, AR, XR, should we just say, it's become just a tool, essentially. Like, this is a storytelling tool.
Yeah.
So is television, so is graphic novels, etc. And it really, you're not just focusing on one thing. It's just like, well, whoever has a good idea for a story, okay, where would that be the most impactful? And then you kind of go that avenue.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting because you can be so flexible. But then also, like you said, it's challenging because then sometimes you might have to learn new aspects, and especially with Galactic Catch being your first VR game, I'm sure there was a lot of learning and challenges behind that. Did you what if you don't mind me asking, what game engine did you use for Galactic Catch?
So in the past we've used both Unity and Unreal Engine for our projects. In the case of Galactic Catch, we used Unity to do it, mainly both based on kind of our familiarity with Unity, but also originally we were hoping to reuse some of the work we've done on our past projects for this project. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But that was also kind of the genesis of using Unity. The other reason we wanted to use Unity was that we've also been noodling around the idea of if we wanted to, how could we take Galactic Catch into a more of a mixed reality format in the future? And Unity is definitely kind of, I would say, compared to Unreal, it's probably like, 1 or 2 years ahead of the curve when it comes to like mobile ready augmented reality and mixed reality experiences. And we have some experience working on that internally, doing kind of internal prototypes. Like we actually managed to get Invasion to run in an AR format, so you can kind of watch it on your iPad in your room. Yeah, it actually really works pretty well. It's kind of like the miniature diorama of like watching Invasion type thing play out. And you can walk around it and so on. But, one of the reasons we focus so much on in Galactic Catch on the aquarium experience, kind of having this really interactive, really customizable aquarium that you can go to, is with the future premises, would people want to have an augmented reality aquarium in their living room where they can place things, can walk around things, they can have fish kind of walk, swim around them and interact with those things as kind of a relaxing, 5-10 minute break experience from, escape from the real world.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the, future proofing it by going down Unity path.
I just thought of an idea. It's like, I don't know if Meta have thought about this, or if people who have the Quest 3 developers and such may have already seen this, but I just thought of something really cool. Back in the day when website builders were very common, and people would like embed, say now their Spotify player, or embed like a quiz or something with like a piece of code. I wonder if Meta with their Quest 3 home being so more focused on mixed reality, you could make your own like mixed reality home, and say if there was like a piece of code or something that could take from Galactic Catch, and so they can put their aquarium in their Oculus home. I think that would be a really, I don't even know if that could properly work with how it happens in the back end, but I'm just thinking as a non-VR developer, if if you could bring aspects of games into your home like that.
It's actually one of the things we've actually asked Meta in the past, where we've created these beautiful environments, like in Galactic Catch, you have like the different locations, you have your ship and so on. While I think there's a few really good like Meta designed like home inspired environments, I think one of the things we would love to do is actually like allow that more customization for players, right? Like I think that is probably the ultimate trophy room, right? Is like is showcasing the stuff you've done in games or whatever, So
your Oculus home could have because that will also make you want to go back into Galactic Catch and play more, so you can have more of a collection. The same as a game like Forever Bowl, for example, where you can collect different bowling balls and such. And imagine if you had like a little rack where you could just see all of the bowling balls you've collected or something.
I believe the PCVR Oculus Home used to have something along these lines.
Yeah, they had something called like you could like give people like custom items, but I think they got rid of that at some point to do. But I mean, I think that is especially with like even with Apple and so on, where they kind of have gotten rid of the idea of controllers potentially and just using hand gestures. That like if you can use your hands to swipe between different collections that you've gained. In your room, and even the simple things of like you mentioned, kind of like the websites and so on. One of the things we've always talked about internally is like who's going to create kind of the screensavers for augmented reality of like the different backgrounds and so on that you want to use to, rather than waking up and you're seeing the sun outside, or in the case of San Francisco, like gloomy weather right now, the vista of some alien planet right outside your window instead.
Yeah, you can have your own kind of the customization. I feel like they really did leave it at the PC VR, and maybe because of the Quest 2's power, and there's been a lot of times where the Quest 2's been quite laggy, or if the battery's slightly low, it's all over the place, or if the storage is full, maybe they're like, okay, let's just cut all of that stuff out. But I'm wondering, with that added increase in power of the Quest 3, could they potentially have something like that back in, or more optimized or such?
That's our hope. That's our hope, to be able to like pretty much get rid of all the limitations that we had to put on for the Quest 2 to make sure the game ran well. Our hope is now with the Quest 3 and beyond, pretty much remove all those limitations that we had and really take this immersion and just showcase the beauty of what we've done to the next level with the Quest 3.
I wonder how the custom home, because there are a few games, as Brink has a home environment, and there's at least one or two other games. I think the Mist has one. I'm not sure how these games worked that out with Meta, as far as like having a whole entire home environment with their game, or even if it's possible for a game, because there are a bunch of them on side quest. I think a lot of them are free, but I don't think there's anything necessarily stopping a studio from creating their own and selling it on side quests for $1 or whatever, or maybe if you have your game that you buy comes with a code, then you type it in, you get that home environment free.
We'll check it out, because we've actually I think that's one of the premises of what all the environments we created was the future, to be able to allow that to happen. And they are incredible. They would be perfect for that. Instead of you're fishing, that's where your menus are. And sorry to switch subjects here, but please, y'all have so many movies, and it's the interactive. And I saw Upload recently had an article about the VR movie festival or something that they're at. And I see all these articles about VR movies, but I don't really see, and I see that you can buy a pass to it or whatever to attend the event. But post the event, I don't see any way of really watching these movies. There's no Netflix for VR experiences or anything like this. Like, where do you see that going, or how do you see that improving, or what are your thoughts on VR movies? And I would say doing a VR movie is still pretty challenging overall. That while we've gotten pretty good accolades for our past experiences, and we've had millions of people watch our experience past, like Invasion and so on. What we've seen so far in the space is that. And one of the reasons we did Galactic Catch was that players are pretty conscientious of what they're going to purchase or not on the stores, and there's kind of that equation. I think they all do in their heads of for each $1 I'm going to spend, how much gameplay, how many hours I'm going to get out of this, and so for us, one of the challenges is kind of and I think it's changing now. But one of the challenges that I think film developers in space have is really teaching the audience that this is not necessarily a game. This is not necessarily a multi-hour thing or something that, something that's comparable to a game, but something with a beginning, end, and a story to it, and has it's good for its own merits. And so I think that's why, you see lots of these VR films and so on, really just focus on kind of the film going experience of, premiering at a film festival or other places, and not getting much success outside of it, because they just focus on a really small audience of the film community and so on, that kind of has already previously embraced their content. I also think, it's one of those, it might be a little bit of a stereotype, but, it's many artists that kind of create these films are not the best when it comes to marketing their projects.
Yeah, 100%.
They're very good at the creation part. But I think lots of the assumption is the creation will speak for itself, because it's that good or that interesting and that good. But no one can find it. And so that's actually one of the reasons we did work with external creators for some Paper Birds. That was one of our first projects we published, but we weren't the original creators of, was because we had experience working with the team before. We loved their work on past projects, and we thought, our muscle, our pedigree, our experience publishing content in the VR space, would allow for this to have more legs than if it was just they did it on their own. So we always look for opportunities like that. That if there's creators that have had success or doing something really interesting in the VR space, can we take it to outside the film festival, or honestly even work on a non-VR project with them, because their talent is maybe not just confined only to the VR space. And that's actually what with Momoguru, the project I mentioned that we were doing a Roblox game on, and making to a TV series and so on. The creators of Momoguru actually got their start in the VR space doing a project called Battlescar.
I know that one.
Back in the day. And now they're working with us on a non-VR project. And so, it's one of those interesting things where VR is kind of pushing the foreground still, and even in the non-gaming space, I just don't think it gets so much attention because lots of these film creators in the VR space are competing with traditional film creators at the same events, same festivals, and so it's they get kind of crowded out to a certain extent.
Yeah, it hasn't found its home yet. I wish Meta would almost become a movie studio or publisher, right? Sink a boatload of money into some VR content that's taken in that way. It's not a game; it's more of a movie, and then obviously they'd be in charge of marketing. They could frame it hey, this is what these are. These aren't full-fledged, hour-long campaign. These are things you're going to take in 5, 10, 15-minute intervals. And almost be like a Netflix, all right, now I'm going to sub to my Meta movies. You come out with one a month or something like this. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think there's, it's one of those weird things where I think it's, even though some of our projects are pretty old now compared to when they released 2 or 3 years ago, we're actually getting in some cases more views and awareness on our projects that released 2 years ago or so. I think because now people are looking for more content, those who have the Quest 2, who are enjoying the Quest, the Quest ecosystem, mainly because I think lots of while there's really great games out there, I think lots of the games are very similar in nature to each other. I do think there's a limit of how many shooters one can play in a given day. And so it's actually interesting that, to your point, Simpson, I think there is there is that starting that, because not just yourself that said, we've actually had other people come, on other podcasts and other things talk to us as well about they didn't know about experiences like Bonfire and others in the past. They kind of got buried somewhere in the Quest store. But now that they've seen Bonfire and other things, like they want to see more of it, and they just don't know where to go to to find it at this point.
Bonfire was one of my first ones. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, I was also about to say Meta needs to do a better way at curating the store as well. Where we've spoken about it on this podcast before, but like just going on the Oculus TV, let alone there's a few really good pieces of content mixed in with some not so great pieces of content, and they just need to do a better way of putting it straight and forward and going curating that list and actually going, okay, you like say Paper Birds. Here's Paper Birds 2. Here's also Invasion. Here's also If the Asteroids is on there and such. Like these are all these things that you'll probably like, and they just need to do better at that, because then it's in front of you. And also the amazing thing about the experiences that you guys create is that they're accessible to everybody. They're not just for the gamer. They're not, this morning I said to my girlfriend, I was like, these creators do normally like interactive films, and I was speaking to her about Invasion. And I will let her try it later on today, but I feel like she's going to love it. She's going to just jump into that. And she doesn't play VR at all, but this is an experience that anyone can get behind.
And it's free, right? So that's quite
it's free. And one of the things we're going to be doing in the near future is now that we have Galactic Catch out, we're going to create some like bundles and opportunities so people can try out Galactic Catch and our past experiences together. For us, it's really just about, having people aware of our stuff. So, more than happy to, send you guys some codes and so on for your guys' audience so they can try out Bonfire, Bobby God, and kind of our past experiences. We'd love to get, more
Bobby
reviews and more positivity, the better.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll do a giveaway for sure. We'll talk about it after the show, but yeah, for sure. No, that'd be great, because I feel like a lot of people, even in just our audience, have not checked out any of these interactive experiences, let alone Galactic Catch. Galactic Catch might be more in their alleyway because it's a game, but then you've got all these other things. Like Paper Birds for me is phenomenal.
Oh, thanks.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's one of the best interactive VR films that I've played, or I guess played is not the word, but experience is the word, right? I see so many few people. But you're right though. Like some of these experiences are so quote unquote old now, technically. But I think because also VR is evolving, there's getting more and more new users. This is going to be their first time, playing it. So that's probably why as well.
And I think what you were saying, Dan, is spot on. That because lots of these are story driven, the story is timeless, right? That, regardless of, it being a year or two or more old, like it's so easy to jump into and so easy to be immersed because the story of the characters, are universal in nature. There's, you don't need a lot of background. You don't need to understand, complex controls. The setup is done right away in front of you, and that I think means that Invasion, even though it's, close to, it was released first in 2016, as an experience, it's still super popular nowadays just because, the idea of, you saving the world as from alien creatures as a bunny, is a timeless story, regardless of what platform and what medium you can tell it on.
Exactly.
Do you notice, is Invasion downloaded on most Quest 2s? Do you see, if there's a Quest 2 sale, do you see peaks in Invasion downloads type of deal?
We actually, we've seen most of the peaks over kind of the holiday season, when I think new people are getting headsets, trying out something for the first time.
Free. Yep.
What's free, for them to try out. That's where we've seen our peaks, with Invasion, and in some of our other past content, but for sure Invasion, just because it's free and available, to anything. And then the other thing we've seen with lots of our content is that people, happen to first find our stuff on something like YouTube and so on. And then from there, they go into, to download or watch in some more kind of immersive format. But, Invasion's like a great example of a story that, while it's got millions plus downloads on Quest and so on, it's gotten tens of millions of views on things like YouTube and so on as well, just because the story works regardless of what the platform is.
Right, it's timeless. Yeah, it's like a movie. It's like the movie Titanic is still a good movie, and it came out in the 90s.
Yeah, and now it's still top 10. It's top 10 on Netflix, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Even though
I actually did see that the other day. I was like, oh, is this trending again? I want to kind of speak about mixed reality a bit more. Like, David, obviously the Quest 3 is going to be very focused on mixed reality. It seems to be like one of their biggest selling points. We spoke about that, Samson, on a previous podcast. How excited does that get you, where there'll be more mixed reality available to more people, essentially, and the amount of different ways you could do storytelling with that?
So for us, it's both exciting but also a challenge, because one of the things that we have tried to avoid in all of our VR content is keeping it believable for players. And one thing that I think has been challenging to date with mixed reality, and I think it's going to be changing with the Apple and Quest 3 and so on, is that this idea of the setup and how do you define your boundaries in something like augmented reality. I think one of the challenges in past augmented reality, if anyone's done it like using an iPad or iPhone or anything like that, is like, you have to scan the room. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. When you place objects, it kind of sometimes it detects the wall, sometimes it doesn't detect the wall. And for us, we wanted to, we don't want users to go through that type of experience, that type of setup that breaks the immersion, breaks the feel for us. So what we're really excited about, based on some of the things we've seen, is if that detection, if that sense of presence is taken care of,
it just works. It just works as intended, right?
Just works as intended. That what gets excited, because then you can have things, you can have things coming out of the walls, like you can have characters recognizing objects in your space. So like something jumping over your couch, or versus going around your couch. Like one of the things we did in Bonfire was we created an AI system for the characters you interact with. And so depending what you do or don't do, the characters react to you differently. And all that animation it does is procedural generated based on what happens in the scene, what inputs, you do not do, and the inputs. And we would love to be able to take that kind of same systems to the augmented reality space, and then add kind of this real world context to it, where it knows the coffee table is there, so it decides to either go around or or above, and not just straight through it instead. And that's where it gets really exciting for us. Whether it be Galactic Catch, of like having the ultimate aquarium in your living space, but some of the things we're talking internally about are some non-Galactic Catch related things of like, how can we really bring that same level of character immersion, same character connection into your living room. And in some ways, it's actually easier because you actually don't have to necessarily render out the full scene. So you can really focus all the pixels and all the processing power on that one character.
But you don't know where that character is going to be.
But you don't know where that character is going to be, and everyone. And I think that creates another challenge of like everyone's living room is different, right? Yeah. Like it was hard enough to do in VR. When everyone's play space is different size and so on. But now that you have the living room concept, with different lighting conditions, everything else, that adds both, not an insurmountable challenge, but like a fun type of challenge, for us, just to figure out how can we get the same kind of character connection, story connection that people are used to in the VR space.
Right.
Yeah, I could picture a lot of board games / coffee tables / tabletop kind of AR mixed reality experiences first, because that's something that you can control.
All right, Dan. Dan, picture this. you got like a Farmville type of situation, right? You're at your desk and you've got a farm set up on next to your keyboard that you're just like kind of keeping an eye on. It's mostly running in the background. And then you're like, you know what? I need a break from work. Let me go and farm. See, you know how it's got that little dial you can dial into VR? Then boom, you leave AR mode, you dial into VR, and then you go in. Now you're like first person farming instead of third person. And then in like third person mode, you're grabbing clouds and you're throwing rain on them. You know, oh man, it's I can't like that's the type, like really unique, weird stuff is gonna be cool.
And actually, I you mentioned kind of that dial, like honestly, that was our internally as we talked about it. It's like I don't know how many developers can take advantage of like really going from VR to AR and like back and forth. But like to me, actually, I think that could be one of the hidden superpowers of that platform, being able to like, if I want that more immersion, if I want larger life characters and so on, I'm just gonna press one button and dial it in, and if I want kind of step back and just relax, and have the real world seep in, I can dial it back. And I actually think that it's kind of like the old school like flip phones, right? Like, it's kind of that, it becomes a thing of just like, flicking it on, flicking it off type thing. Right. But I'll be curious to see if developers really go for it. Like, I'm not sure, but that's what actually interests me about it as well.
Yeah,
we won't know till even like the third generation of it anyway.
No, but that's the thing. That's why I mean like the coffee table and the tabletop right now, because I feel like that is the easiest thing you can control until you can prove that this mixed reality works exactly how these videos are showcasing it. And it's like, okay, is it really that seamless? Is it really? Because when I had the Quest Pro for a brief period of time, obviously it didn't have a depth sensor, but I had to map out my walls and desk, which was annoying. But once it was done, it did work really well. When I was playing Demio and you throw the dice, it interacts with the objects correctly and it falls off the desk, and it's cool. Really fun to watch. Yeah. But it just needs to just work. When you put that, it scans around and you're good to go. And until we get to that, if there's too much of a barrier of entry, then there's probably no point in diving deep into it yet. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's exciting times. I mean, I think it's, it's interesting. Like, I think everyone doesn't know where necessarily VR is going to go, next few years. But, if you said, I've been in the VR space and the game space for a long time. And I before I joined BaoBab Studios, I was at a company called Jaunt VR. This was back in 2014 and so on.
Wow.
2015. Wow. And so, I think a lot of people don't remember back in the day, in 2014, 15, et cetera, everything was tethered. Everything. I was going to say,
that's DK1. I went to look back at it. I was like,
yeah. The idea of hand controllers still wasn't really a thing, at that time. And that's why we designed Invasion the way it was, and you just fast forward less than 10 years later, right? Like all that has now gone mobile, all that's gone, tetherless, the cost has gone down, by 10x, or so. And I think people are used to things moving really quickly. And so now it feels like things are moving slower than they should. But, I think, hindsight, being everything, that come 5, 10 years from now, everything will look, real world quality for the most part, like processing power and everything aside, what is reality versus what's not, it's going to be much harder to tell the difference between, whether it's augmented or, VR stuff you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke about this in the last podcast, Samson, but I feel like with Apple in the play space now, things are going to accelerate even more in that respect.
I mean, it took us 15 years to get from the NES to the PlayStation 2. So
things accelerate, exponentially. So David, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I know we kind of had a Galactic Catch to start, but it turned into more of a BaoBab Studios / the future of VR conversation. But it's been really fun.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me on, and definitely, please, for anyone who's listening, please check out Galactic Catch. Leave a review if you can. That's the best way to know. what if we need to, what improvements, what you guys like to see next. But overall, we've been super excited and thrilled by the response that the community's given to Galactic Catch so far.
Absolutely. And Samson, before we go, what have you got behind you? You've got little BaoBab.
Yes. BaoBab was so kind and sent me, I've in front of my DK2 there, sent me a nice little art book here. And it is heavy. I could defend my place with this. And it is more than just like a Galactic Catch. It is on the whole studio here. It's a whole, it's basically a documentary and a book. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, I flipped through it a little bit. I haven't had time to really dissect it.
And there's for those who are interested, we're gonna, we have a few more that we're gonna both give away of those art of BaoBab books, as well as eventually put them on sale for folks to purchase them. But it goes through the history of from the start of the studio to right up to, I would say, like 2020. And it mentions a few projects that actually are now, being released and come to fruition that were just kind of concept art and hints of in the book back in the day. But it tells the story of how invasion, asteroids, and all the things that kind of made up the beginning Galactic Catch got created.
It's only right that a storytelling developing team would write a story about themselves.
and it's the perfect coffee table kind of book to just leave on your coffee table. Perfect. But yeah, David, thank you so much.
I play VR. There's no space for a coffee table here.
You need a virtual version of the book. Is that what you're trying to say?
We do. We do have a digital version for those who don't have the space of
nice PDF.
Nice PDF version of it.
There you go, Samson. No, all the links will be in the description below for BaoBab Studios, so you can check out all of their work. Definitely Invasion because it's free, but then you've also got, like I said, Paper Birds, and all of these experiences aren't that expensive either. And you've got Galactic Catch, I believe it's $12.99 US.
Yeah. I'll add the links to them, Dan. I'll add them all.
Yeah, I sometimes have to check myself because obviously being in Canada, I get confused. But yeah, all of those links will be in the description below. Definitely go check them out. But thank you all so much for watching and listening, and thank you, David, for joining on this podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll hope to get you on the next project for sure.
Thank you very much.